So the topic at hand today is self-awareness and self-compassion. And the perfect person to bring on for this topic is my friend Owen Morgan. So Owen is a massage therapist, podcast host, and well-being coach in training. His passion is supporting people to explore how self-awareness, self-compassion, and being trauma-informed can boost their well-being and improve their life as a whole. He founded and runs the Awareness Space podcast. It's a podcast in a future academy, which will be an educational and community space for those on their healing journey. So I have been on Owen's podcast before, and we were just chatting before that we started recording here. And if you haven't listened to his podcast, I highly encourage it. He's a fantastic host. He's growing like crazy and really brings a lot of great guests on. And his message is really just something that I felt had to be brought onto our audience here. And so, Owen, thank you for being here. I'm excited to dive into some of your favorite topics today.
Well, thanks, Rob. Thank you so much for having me on. And I absolutely loved our conversation on my show. And I was just so honored for you to ask me to come onto this one because there's so much variety to your show. I was looking at all the different topics that you've covered in the past. It's amazing. I realized mine is much more tunnel vision than yours is. So it gave me some ideas. So thank you for that. But yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I think that's a lot of people tell me that the tunnel vision can be a better business model, but I tend to be very curious and like to talk to a lot of people about a lot of different topics, just kind of let my curiosity flow. And, I think that's part of what is fun for me with this conversation. Like we were saying, it's just really fun to have conversations with cool people and to pick their brains and see how they learned all the tools that they have. So with that, I'd love to just start with kind of your journey, how you got into the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you for this space because, I'm sure as you're aware, when you explain the story enough times, you kind of bits get lost or you finesse it a little bit. So I haven't done it for a little while actually, but I'm a big advocate for trauma informed healing. Just to be clear here from the get go, that like trauma is my thing. It's every person comes on my show, it comes up. We've covered it in depth, and I'm very passionate about, and that's because my story was full of trauma up to the point of my healing. And I just think it's something people still don't talk about enough, and they don't know how to deal with trauma. So from my perspective, when I was a kid, I had parents that were always working, hardly ever around. So I had no brothers or sisters. So it's a very lonely time. I was constantly in childcare, but unfortunately the childcare that I was in was quite abusive. So I'd be abused by a childminder who would force feed me and lock me in cupboards if I was bad. Really horrendous time for a 5 or 6, 7-year-old. And then when I went home, I couldn't explain that to my parents. I didn't feel like I had a connection to talk to them about it. So I dealt with it alone all the way up into teenage years, to the point that I started to write a lot of poetry, really dark stuff to express myself. But then as I got to my teenage years, I then got in kind of like with a group of guys at school that would beat me up after school. And, I would always be losing all the competitions. I'd run through tunnels where they're punching me and kicking me. And I would go home with bruises and cuts and try and hide that from my parents, all dealing with it all alone. So it was a very traumatic time. And then by the time I got to my 20s, I was riddled with, really intense depression, couldn't leave the house, interact with new people. And as I started to heal, my anxiety came up. So I was blacking out, fainting from anxiety. My nervous system was just completely all over the place. And I was scared of the world and scared of life. And that was the after effect of the trauma. So my journey ever since has been about how can we deal with these things, and self-awareness and self-compassion were the key components for me, which is why my show is called The Awareness Space. So there's more to my story, but there's some for you.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, man. And I'm reading this book right now called David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, I believe, is the author of that. And he talks about how so often, kind of painting the picture of David being kind of like the small person who's supposed to be inferior to the Goliath, which is the giant guy who's supposed to be inconquerable. And talking about how a lot of people that came from challenging, backgrounds, challenging childhoods, they really have a choice to either continue to be the victim or be the David that overcomes the Goliath, which in your case may be, the self-talk, the negative self-talk, or the, the abuse from outside sources. And it's really amazing for me to see the transcendence and what I call the pain teacher. The pain teacher is the most ruthless teacher out there, but can also be the most honest one. And sometimes we need that pain teacher to give us the opportunity to overcome these challenges. And so, talking to you, I didn't even know that level of depth to your story. And now a lot of it really just shows why you are so passionate about what you do. And I think that's something for a lot of people in this health, wellness, personal development space, is it, like you said, it does come from that state of trauma. The pain teacher taught us such an invaluable lesson that now it's our life mission to make sure nobody else ever experiences that level of pain that we had to go through. And we can provide the tools for people to really combat some of these challenges that many of us face in everyday life. And you mentioned loneliness, which I think is a really big epidemic right now, especially, the past couple of years with all these lockdown craziness. And then we add social media where people are thinking they're being connected, but not really being connected. And it's just this weird time that we're living in terms of loneliness. And I think a lot of that stems from, having this level of self-awareness. So I'd love to kind of dive into that piece first, and maybe the self-awareness, self-compassion are interconnected, but how does one develop some level of self-awareness? I'm sure in those early childhood years, you had to develop, as you got into poetry, some level of self-awareness that may not have been there before.
Yeah, thank you. And it was interesting with the self-awareness piece when I was writing the poetry, because obviously I'd found a way to articulate things on the paper. So I said that takes a certain amount of awareness of what's happened and how that feels to me and how I can witness it or look upon what had happened. I think it's harder for children because that part of their cortex, at the front of their head, still growing, still developing. It's hard when you've got anxiety as a kid to know what to do with it because you don't have the cortex to rationalize things. And I think that's the real lesson here, is that when we go through these tough times and traumatic experiences, our go-to response to survive is to bury it, to disassociate, to distract, to overthink, basically to avoid the unbearable sensations or thought processes, or whatever it may be. And you kind of lose a part of yourself in that process. You kind of lose a sense of who you are and what matters, because you're in survival. The last thing you need to worry about is, actualizing and going on your spiritual path when you are just trying to survive every day. And the only way to truly integrate self-awareness in a way that is going to help you heal is to be able to see all parts of yourself and notice all the sensations and the thoughts. The problem is that's very scary. And it's how can we slowly and subtly implement self-awareness into our life without it being overwhelming and re-triggering ourselves. So for me, it clearly was the concept of writing and putting it on the paper. Therefore, I can witness what had happened. That's a good place to start. That I'm not in it. I'm not buried in the sensation. I'm witnessing the sensation. I only have this language now 20 years later. I didn't know that was what I was doing, but that is what I would apply to that now, is that without me noticing, I innately found a way to witness. And I think for me, the beginning of self-awareness is to be able to witness the experience that you're having.
I love it, man. And, that's really the first step to any change, is being aware. And anything, if you want to get in better shape, you need to be aware of the fact that, hey, maybe I'm not in the best shape, and I need to be aware of the fact that, hey, I probably need to move my body more. Hey, I need to put better fuel into my system. So I think that awareness is the first step to change. And so self-awareness is a whole nother level of being ready to change, because it all comes down to ourselves. Any change starts within here, within our heart, within our head, in our body. We have the absolute control to make the change that we want to see, but we have to be aware of that first. And that's something you mentioned with the word language. That's something I've been incredibly focused on the past few months, is my language, my self-talk, which at times can be self-deprecating, which at times can be shaming, guilting, blaming, all these things that are not helping me to grow. And a lot of that does come from, childhood ideas. A lot does come from an upbringing of scarcity mindset. And so it's very important, I believe, to be self-aware of not only our actions, but our thoughts and our words, because the blend of these together can be the perfect storm for healing, or the perfect storm for continuing to go down this tornado of a lifestyle. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some practical tools that people can utilize to start to develop some level of self-awareness. Because somebody's in the tornado, it can be hard, like you said, to be focused on personal development and the spiritual path when they're in that survival mode. So what do you recommend for first steps?
It's a really, really good question, because like you said, when you're deep in there, it's hard to see things. And just touch on something you said there, building upon that, is that to be aware of all parts of you is to see your blocks, things that stop you doing things, to see, like you said, the mindset and the thought processes that get in your way, to see what triggers you, to see what glimmers you, the things that are good in any given moment. You need to know how do you eat? Are you an emotional eater? Do you eat with defense? Do you eat to hide? There's all the psychology you bring into that. You need to see all the patterns and the processes happening. But it's really hard to do that, like you said, if you're in it and it's all running. Programs are running, neural pathways are firing, body sensations are just surrounding your whole experience in this moment. And it's very difficult. And there's so much out there, from CBT to mindfulness to NLP, lots of techniques that you can use. But for me personally, I don't know if this will apply to everybody, but where my journey began after the poetry is learning about the body, about the brain, about the mind, about these things, psychology. I think for anybody that's stuck in it and isn't ready to deal with what's coming up, or aren't even ready for therapy support for whatever reason, I find if you can go out there and just learn things about the nervous system or about the mind or about what anxiety is, it takes away some of the power. You can say, oh my God, the body's meant to do this. I'm meant to have anxiety. It's to keep me safe. The problem is I'm stuck in survival. So I'm running safety protocols all day, which is really taxing my systems. And for me, it sounds weird. Not many people would have thought about this, but it's not about tackling any of the stuff. Just every day, maybe a podcast or a couple of minute video on YouTube, just pick something. Oh, I wonder what anxiety means. And then just type it in, watch a few things. It's really empowering. You're like, holy hell. Okay, cool. I get it now. I get it why I have it. It takes some of the sting away. It makes you go, oh my God, this is a biological response. It's not my fault. There's nothing wrong with me. And as soon as you know there's nothing wrong with you, it removes the shame, and then you're able to open up to experience the things that are going on. So if that kind of makes sense, mate, it's this educational piece, which is why my Awareness Space Academy, when I launch it, first and foremost, the place we begin, the place we start with is education. All my clients start with education. That's how I'm going to coach. And then we approach their stuff once they understand a bit more about what it is to be human.
Absolutely love that. And a big part of my journey from recovering from my concussion was learning about psychology. And really, like you said about the anxiety pieces or depression or whatever the case may be, the challenge somebody's dealing with, that is a natural phenomenon that, like you said, our body's here to protect us. Our body's not the enemy. Our body is actually our greatest ally. Now we just need to learn to work within that system. And I remember when I started learning about the nervous system, the fact that we have two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, and starting to understand that really helped me to wrap my head around the fact, just like you're saying, that, oh, the anxiety is actually here to protect me. It's a sign that something is out of balance. It's a sign that I'm not in homeostasis. It's a sign that my nervous system is overtaxed right now. It's overstimulated. So how can I bring myself back to balance? That's the key, is how can we get back to that state of balance? How can we get back into that parasympathetic state, that rest and digest mode, instead of being so chronically sympathetically dominated? And so that's where now we have, like you said, the awareness, we have the understanding, we have the education that our body is actually maybe the most incredible vessel that's ever been placed on this planet. The fact that we can do the things we do, we have consciousness, we have all these different pieces that make us a human. So rather than looking at it as an enemy, how do we now use this tool for the better? How do we find the tools, the tips, the tricks that can help us to balance out that anxiety? Oh, meditation. Oh, that calmed my anxiety. Okay, great. Walking. Oh, that really calmed my anxiety. Oh, getting better sleep. Oh, drinking more quality water. Oh, eating better foods. And then all these little tools start to blend together to become this perfect storm where we're now a healthier, happier individual, because we're doing the things that our body wants. We're fueling our system to bring us back to that homeostasis and get out of that fight or flight mode, that survival mode we were talking about, get us to this grounded place where we're balanced in the parasympathetic nervous system. And now we can look at life from a much clearer perspective, because it's very tough to look and start to plan our future when we're stuck in that survival mode. So I think it's really, in my perspective, like you said, starting with the awareness, following with education, then building a toolbox to help us combat any challenges we face.
Yeah, it's so powerful, because someone will give you a technique and you won't know why you're doing it. You kind of need to know why you're doing it. And
Right.
It starts with the initial thing. And once you know your body well enough and you're familiar with your sensations, you will know what techniques will feel right. And the prime example, every mindfulness teacher will tell you, including my partner, who is one, is that if someone has chronic anxiety, to sit still and to follow their breath, or to be in their body, or to allow their thoughts to flow through their mind when their thoughts are 100 miles an hour and they can't seem to make it the speed intensity stop. Meditation can fire it all up and make it 10 times worse. That was my journey. I started with meditation and it was an absolute disaster to begin with, because I wasn't able to go into parasympathetic. It'd been too long in sympathetic to do that. And that's a really important message for everybody. Don't just think, oh, you download this app, boom, guided meditations, I'm sorted. There may be other things you can do. And for me personally, what really helped me initially was, like you said, going for walks. So at least it's still sympathetic. But what I'm doing is I'm doing an activity where I can kind of be mindful, be aware of my movement, my feet on the ground, but at least you're moving, your body's using so much sympathetic energy. It's knowing your chemical makeup in that moment, how best to discharge it in a way that makes sense. So for me now, my main meditation practice is actually to get the palm of my hand. It's because I'm a massage therapist, I think, of 10 years, but I will press, on the underside of one of the knuckles on the palm, and lightly press the points, really lightly, and bringing my awareness to it. It's absolutely amazing. It really calms my body down. I'm bringing awareness to a part of the body, giving it some love, basically, and some gentleness. And it really, really calms me down. And then I'm ready to meditate. So it's just knowing your chemical makeup. It's not right or wrong. It's just yours. And your daily practice will shift and change. But don't let anybody tell you this is what you do, because this is what is being researched. What about your body and what you need? That's self-awareness, right?
I love that. And I just was doing this little knuckle massage, and man, it just calmed me right down. So that's going to be a new tool in my toolbox. But just like you said with the meditation, when I'm working with clients, I'm rarely advising somebody meditate if they are looking to make a change in their life as a starting point. Down the road, definitely a great tool. But one of my favorite things that I recommend for every single client is get outside and go for at least a 5-minute walk every day without your phone. Phone stays at home. Preferably we go longer than 5 minutes, but if that's all the time, somebody has right now, we start with 5, we work it up. And that right there, just like you said, now we can use that as a vehicle to practice mindfulness. Go for a 5-minute walk and focus on breathing through your nose the whole time. Great. Go for a 5-minute walk and be aware of the sunshine on your body. Great. Like you said, with the footsteps, we can use walking as this incredible vehicle as a basis for mindfulness and self-awareness. Because oftentimes when I'm thinking, or when I'm walking rather, some of my best thoughts come up. A lot of my best thoughts come in the shower and when I'm walking. When I'm not focused on working, I'm actually focused on disconnecting. That's when those things come up, because I'm allowing myself to disconnect. I'm allowing myself to disconnect from the world and reconnect with myself. And with the process of walking, humans are designed to walk. That's why we stand up on 2 feet. We're intended to move in this pattern. And so when we can do something that is, again, coming back to working with our body, like we were saying earlier, this is, I think, a great gateway to start to implement a lot of these other practices, because now you change from walking, you can do Tai Chi, because maybe Tai Chi is a better form of meditation for somebody than a sit still meditation. For me, sitting still, especially when I'm working, sitting at a computer, doing great podcast episodes and editing content and stuff like that, doing a sit still meditation for me right now is not the best method for me to relax, because I've already been sitting all day. So for me, doing some sort of Tai Chi or restorative yoga or walking is a much better suited tool for me. But back in college, when I was landscaping during the summers, doing a sit-still meditation was the best thing because I was on my feet and moving all day. So it really comes down to piecing these in with our lifestyle, however we see fit. And that's what I really like about, everything you've shared, is that there's no one size fits all. Just because the latest research says that meditation is the greatest for this, cool, may not be the best for you right now. So just building that toolbox and having that self-awareness to say, hey, I'm going to be my own guinea pig. And yeah, science is great to use, but that's a tool. I wasn't in that study. Maybe it's not the best tool for me right now. So kind of using all these different tools and playing around with all the different ways that we can implement these tools into our life, I think is a really great starting point.
Yeah, so much power in what you said there. And I think it's understanding your own needs too. When we talk about self-awareness, it's not just being aware of what's coming up, but kind of having an idea of your values and your needs and what matters to you. And if there is some purpose that you're really drawn to, including that into your day. It's everything about how you live your life, what you're doing. Is it authentic? Or is what you're doing kind of authentic to you? Are there times where you abandon yourself for others, or you do it quite often? Or are you attending to your needs? Do you attend or do you abandon? This is all the spectrum of self-awareness. And you can just start at different points that feel comfortable for you. But I think listening and then attending is the key here. And sometimes you are going to want to, get home from work and you don't want to exercise, you want to eat a whole tub of ice cream or whatever it may be. Then just do it with compassion. Just say, do you know what? I do actually need this today. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go out on the town and go out with the guys or the girls and have a dance, maybe have a few drinks. And even though I really shouldn't because I got work tomorrow, the key to the compassion bit is if that's what you need right now, then do it. As long as it's not harming you and a thing you do regularly that's causing problems. It's knowing not to be too hardcore about, being super healthy and sticking to these daily practices every single day. Do the best you can each day based on what's coming up, but always do it with a sense of loving kindness and compassion, and knowing that most of everything that we're doing, how we're reacting, is normal. And when we know that, you need to remove that shame. Shame is the thing that's going to keep you stuck. And we have to know that, there is the opposite to shame will be that self-compassion piece. So I always say, can you be compassionate to yourself when you've just done something that's not compassionate? That's the hard one. You've done something, you snapped at someone. Can you also then say sorry to them and be compassionate to you and say, it's okay, Owen, you snapped. It's not easy. We will beat ourselves up about it. So it's like, to meet yourself on your darkest day is where some transformation can really take place, I think.
I love that. And one thing you mentioned there is the spectrum, is that I think it's very easy to be binary with, everything. This is good, this is bad. Or I'm hurt, I'm healthy. What about I'm healing? What if I'm on the process of moving along this spectrum? I think it's very easy to get caught up in this binary language of it's always this, it's never that. But what if we're somewhere in the middle? What if we were, unhealthy, but now we're in the process of getting healthier? We may not be at our goal yet, but to think that it has to be one or the other, that's what I think the word spectrum uses is so powerful. Because there's a lot of space in between point A and point B that doesn't always get talked about. I think it's very easy to highlight the end goal. It's very easy to highlight what people call like an overnight success, because they're not showing that journey between point A to point B. And like you're saying here is that there's going to be times that, hey, maybe we do go down a little dark rabbit hole. That's okay. That's part of life. The past couple of days have not been my most productive days. And rather than beating myself up for it, I'm aware of the fact, hey, there's something going on right now that maybe I need to give myself some more time to rest. Maybe I need to spend some more time reflecting. Whereas before I would have been beating myself up and trying to force through this period of not being productive by doing more work. And again, not listening to my body, but listening to the ego in my head. And so a lot of that does come down to self-compassion. And so I'd love to just kind of hear in your own words, how do you define self-compassion? Because I think it means a little bit different to everybody.
Yeah, self-compassion for me is kind of what I mentioned earlier, is that no matter what comes up or what you say in your own mind or what's going on with your body, you always meet it with compassion. So you say, I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you. All the things that we're told to be as therapists or coaches, isn't it? To hold the space, to everyone wants to be heard and listened to and understood and to be valued. that is the essence of compassion. If you're thinking about other people, is to hold a space for them and say, I'm here for you. And I know it's cheesy, but we do kind of have to do it for ourselves. And it's really, really bloody difficult, because our thoughts and negativity bias and programming from what people said to us as a kid or what we've been saying regularly has become like a neural pathway thing. And those thoughts keep coming back. And how can we meet those thoughts with compassion? So just even if you want to add humor in too, that's compassionate too. You can be kind of like, hey, certain thought, I see you. I know you like to come and pop up on the weekends. And, you just kind of just need to meet everything that's going on for you with this sense of loving kindness and holding. Really, I think compassion is all about holding and nurturing. And I think that's what it means to me. And I think that's why when we become self-aware with our negativity bias and survival response is to be judgmental. Here you go again. You're doing it again. Classic Owen, or classic emotional eater, or classic people pleaser. And you just bury yourself in the process of becoming self-aware. So if you enter that journey with both the awareness and the compassion, you can see some of your inverted comma negative traits or negative programming and meet it with compassion. And to be honest, that will be a big shift for the program in the first place, because the healing journey is very much about unlearning things and learning new things. So unwiring and wiring new pathways. So I always say to people, don't just spend every day just constantly rewiring and trying not to do your stuff and resisting this and resisting that and trying to make change. How about you do something new? Try something new that will light up your life, and you'll find the other things that aren't helpful will drift away because you're replacing it with something positive. It's not always about just unwiring. It's about creating new things. And I think I got off on a tangent, I do apologize. The essence of me for suffering is that you have pain come up, you don't like it, you suppress it, you push it away, you resist it. Resistance creates suffering. I think you have the initial pain, which you can work with, but as soon as you start layering resistance to it, go away, I don't like it, you are now suffering. And I've started to try doing that when I have cramps. So when a cramp comes up in my leg, or maybe I actually just let it be there. So rather than rubbering it and walking around the room, I hold it and I just try and, maybe visualize, good times, good things. And it just passes. I didn't need to rub it or move around. It's kind of, the pain comes up. As soon as we resist, it makes it worse and it creates suffering. And if you think about that mentally and emotionally, I think that's what's happening for a lot of us, is we're resisting what we're feeling, and it disconnects us, makes us not feel present, and creates suffering. So compassion is about allowing the pain to come up. I hear you, I see you, I'm here for you. It's not easy, and you'll probably need someone to help you with that, to hold the space with you to start with, co-regulation, and then go from there. So compassion is holding. I do apologize, went off on one.
No, it was beautiful. I love that. And to your point, you mentioned a couple of great things, and one was the kind of bringing some humor into it. And that's where, one of my buddies, he talks about how sometimes if we give our negative side a name, and then it's like, oh, here comes Nancy again. Nancy's coming up to, be the negative Nancy and start doing that. And then we kind of bring a little humor to the situation. And now it's almost like we're recognizing this is a piece of us, but we're not saying, oh, I'm the negative one. It's saying, oh, Nancy's the negative piece of me and she's showing up. So I'm going to say, hey, Nancy, I don't want to talk to you right now. And I thought that was a really kind of funny, like almost like what you do with a kid, kind of play like little games with them and show them the different ways that they can interact with themselves. So I think the humor side is a really great tool to use. And that's why I think comedians do such a good job, is comedians are the only people that can really talk about the darkest things and make it funny. Because that's what a lot of their skits are about, is they talk about, oh, this crappy thing happened to me on the way on the subway. And now they tell the story, but instead of talking about it from the victim perspective, they take it from the comedic perspective. So if we can implement some of these tools in our own life, it's like, oh, here comes Nancy telling me I'm not good enough again, and playing the game that way. I just think it makes things a little bit lighter. And I'm not saying I do that all the time. I definitely fall into my, negative states at time and don't realize until it's a little bit later than I like it to be, but that's part of the learning process. And then the other thing I really like that you said is kind of sitting with that discomfort. And like I was saying earlier with the pain teacher is here to knock and say, hey, buddy, there's something you might want to pay attention to. It's a warning sign. It's like your engine light on your car's coming on. It's like, hey, something's going on. Might as well check that out instead of saying, oh man, this is all falling apart. Say, hey, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Oh, maybe I'm feeling upset because I said something and never apologized to that person. Oh, maybe I'm feeling anxious because I haven't exercised today. And usually I have exercised by this point. Oh, maybe I'm dehydrated. And so we can start to learn the language of our body in these signs and symptoms. Like the most common cause of headaches is not an aspirin deficiency. It's usually the fact that we're dehydrated is the most common cause of headaches, is a slight dehydration. So if we can learn from our body, if I have a headache and then I think, have I had much water today? The answer is usually no, because I usually don't get headaches, but it's pretty clear to me that when I do, it's usually due to dehydration. That's learning the language of our body. And so that goes back to the self-awareness, kind of coming full circle here, is starting this journey. If we're in a state of stress, we're in a space of challenge, just doing a little practice of self-awareness, spending some time walking, spending some time disconnecting from the phone, spending some time writing. I think that is one of the most powerful tools that has become less and less utilized over the years, is the act of writing things down, as we have our phones to easily distract us and dive into a different world, essentially. The process of writing is incredibly therapeutic. And that's another practice I always recommend with clients is, if you don't have a journal, get a journal. If you don't have a journal right now, just write on a piece of paper, because getting those things out of our head and onto the piece of paper can make the world of a difference. So I'm curious to hear, are you still writing poetry, or is that more of a tool that you go to when you need it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That I always think, oh, could I write again if I gave it a try? And every now and again, I'll crack one out. Once a year, I'll write one. I thought, it's quite good still. Okay, cool. But I do manage to write in lots of different ways. So writing for my vlogs or my website, or for the podcast. So I think I am kind of writing in that way. I'm just presenting it in that way. And I think you're right. Getting things out of our heads. I think you think about how many thoughts are flowing through your mind in any given day. It's, if you're trying to remember all the self-awareness things you've learned about yourself, but all of it's in your head, you're having to hold all this information about your healing journey that you're about to go on, whilst having all your normal thoughts. So you're right. Sometimes if you start to become aware of things and sensations or times of day that have a certain impact on you, or certain people or certain environments, or your values or your needs, jot all of those down. You get like a little blueprint for who you are as a human right now. Yeah, like all of the stuff that makes you tick and all the stuff that triggers you. I think having all that in your head is a little bit intense. So just putting all of that out there is a really powerful tool to see you kind of, if you're talking about witnessing, looking in at your experience, how about get it all on the paper and then witness that? There's me on paper, so to speak.
Love that.
And it's just a really good way, because so often on my journey, I've not done that. I've just kind of, I've had a big revelation about a pattern of mine, and then carried on for a few days and have forgotten what it was. So I had this big enlightening moment and forgotten it and gone straight back to my programming. Right. So it's when you do have those magical moments, like record it, maybe pop it down on your phone on a voice memo or something. And I find just talking to my friends on Instagram, send a message, hey man, how you doing? We share it with our revelations from the week gone by, and then it's in voice clip form. You can listen to it back. It's quite cool hearing yourself back. I think the podcast is therapeutic. I'll re-listen to stuff that I've done and go, hey man, that's cool. This guy's cool. So it is that too, isn't it? That's kind of fun as well, isn't it? That sort of thing.
It is. And I think, to your point, that's one thing I do really like about the podcast is being able to go back and listen to the immense amount of growth that's happened, over a year, 2 years, 6 months, however the time frame is. And it's also cool to hear there's a handful of people that have told me, oh, I started listening to your first episode. And then I listened to some of the later ones. They're like, you've changed a lot. And it's really cool to hear that feedback from other people as well. The tangible growth that happens when we are documenting. We're documenting our experience, or we're documenting our lifestyle, whether it is through writing, whether it is through voice messages or podcasting or wherever the form is. But I think that it's easy to overlook the amount of growth we've had until we actually document it. And that's where I think the journaling is so powerful, to look back at a journal from a year ago, 2 years ago, and just see what were the type of words that I was writing down back then? What was my mindset at? And sometimes I look back and things, I was like, geez, that was a dark time. I'm glad I learned from that experience. And there's other times like, wow, that was something really profound. I'm glad I wrote that down, because I probably would have forgotten it, like you said. So Man, this has been a lot of fun, Owen. I'd love to just kind of have you leave the listeners with any final thoughts that you have, and then where people can get in contact with you, learn more about your academy, listen to your podcasts, and all the great stuff you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, man. I've absolutely loved talking about this, and I can do it all day long. That's probably why my podcasts are so long. So just to warn people, mine is a long form show, an hour and a half, probably normally, but that's my style. I love diving deep, and it works really well. But my final thoughts are just to get people to always really sort of think about this intending piece. It's really important to me. It's my new language, which is, how often do you attend to yourself each day? Is there a time, just a few minutes, where you check in? Do you check in with your body sensations, your thoughts, how the day's gone so far, how you're feeling about things? Just a little attendance time, just to say, what do I need to do later? Because sometimes we just get stuck in our subconscious programming and the habits that we get into, and then we start people pleasing. Maybe you're absolutely exhausted and you want some quiet time, but your friend's like, come out, we go and dancing. Don't be lame, come out. And how can we deal with these situations and say, do you know what, I just want to chill out with the cat, maybe have a bath or whatever, and just attending to what's coming up. And that applies to pain too. So like we said before, it's not easy, and please do it carefully, and don't do it if it's triggering in any way. But just noticing something uncomfortable, maybe you've got a tight back, or you're noticing your heart's pumping, you can feel it pumping, or you just feel a little bit not in the room. So it can be emotional and physical too. Just check in and go, wow, okay, what do I need to do? What would really help me here? Would it be to laugh, to dance, to sing out loud? Would it be to put my feet on the ground outside? Just really get to know yourself in any given situation. And the final piece for me, which sounds really counterproductive, but please don't be overly self-aware. So don't get into the habit of spending all day being self-aware, because I went down that road for a while and it was exhausting. I couldn't actually just enjoy life. I was like, how do I feel about this? How do I feel? What's happening for me here? Is this triggering me? It was all day. It's like I
I've done
created a
that
new
too.
problem. So it's sometimes turn it off.
Right.
Just fall into your programs and just have a laugh, or be silly, or do things that maybe not be right that helpful right now. So self-awareness only to a certain point. Sometimes a compassionate thing to do is say, I'm just going to distract myself all day and play video games and whatever, and just enjoy yourself, because life needs to be full of all these experiences. So I just encourage people to think about how often they attend. And that would be kind of my final piece to take away, because it's not really an exercise as such. It's just checking in. And I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely love it, man. And that's what it is. Life isn't supposed to be so serious. And I've gone down that same place where every moment had to be productive. Every moment had to be a personal development moment. Every moment had to be a business growth moment. And then it's easy to burn out that way. It's easy to turn something that you love into a chore. So, brother, how can people get in contact with you, learn about all the great stuff you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. So just type in the awareness space on Google or whatever, and it will bring up the website. It will bring up the podcast. That is the awareness space on all the platforms, of course. Like I say, there's a new episode every week. It's a long form show, so you might want to listen to it in chunks, but it covers everything from their story, talking in depth about the topic they're discussing, messages of hope at the end. So it's split up so you can listen to it in parts. Let's put it that way. And then YouTube, there's some like educational videos and stuff on there. I'm due to qualifying coaching the next couple of weeks, hopefully, depending on how my assignments go. And then I'll be launching my Awareness Space Academy, which is a place of education, visualizations, relaxation audios. It's all audio format. And there'll be a private Instagram page for members only. And it's like a members community thing for people on their healing journey. I'm really excited to hold that space. A little bit nervous, but looking forward to it. So that's kind of the main parts of it, really, is the podcast and this upcoming coaching. But just type it in and it will be there.
Beautiful. And for anybody listening, I will put the links in the description box as well. So you can either check out the link in the description, search it on your favorite search engine, and give it a listen. As I mentioned, when I was on Owen's show, I had a great time. He's a phenomenal host. Obviously, you've heard him talk today, and you can recognize that he is a incredibly passionate human being about what he does. And I really want to encourage you to check out all the great work he's doing, because I know that you will gain some great value from that. So, Owen, I appreciate you being you, my friend, and appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. And the best thing about all of this is all of the friends all over the world I've made, including you. It feels so special to be able to reach out to all these amazing humans and be on the same page and hold a space for each other. It's a really important message for everybody. People that can hold space for you, it's life-changing. So thank you for being one of those guys.
Likewise, my friend. And everybody listening, have an amazing day. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Whole Health of Rob Carney podcast with my wonderful guest, Owen Morgan. I really want to encourage you to check out all the great work that Owen has done. Like we mentioned in the beginning, we have done a great episode together on his podcast. So if you have not already checked that out, I want to encourage you to go over his way and check out the episode we did together, along with the other episodes that he has done and is continuing to put out on a regular basis. And we, as podcast hosts, really appreciate the support. So if you enjoyed this episode, please do share with a friend, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, depending on which platform you're on, give a rating if you can, and let us know what you like best about it. This really helps us to maximize our input and the effort that we put out into the world so we can help you and help the world be a healthier, happier, more sustainable place. If you want to continue to support this podcast, you can check out some of my favorite superfood sponsors, such as Purium Health Products, Mushroom Revival. You can look at Bioptimizers, Aries Tech, and BioLite, which are all great tools that are all over my website. So those are focusing on optimizing our nutrition, reducing our exposure to EMFs, getting red light therapy. Anything you're looking for, head to wholehealthconnects.com. Those are affiliate links, so I do get some kickback from that, and that allows me to have the freedom of time to continue to put out these episodes. So anything you see on there that can benefit you will also benefit me. So thank you for being you. Thank you for your support. Have an incredible day. Check out the links in the description. Check out the website with all our superfood tools, and we'll talk to you soon.